Brothers and sisters, we have now come to the section where the speakers will take questions from the audience. And I have here the first question, which is directed to Brother Benny Liao. Let me just read it. As it goes, as cases continue to rise, with no sign of the pandemic ending soon, it is difficult not to worry about job security. Companies will sooner or later automate the jobs and downsize their workforce. And we are told to continuously upskill ourselves before the automation actually overtakes us. Now, how do we have peace in the present without having this worry lingering in our minds? So now I would like to invite Brother Benny Liao to answer this question. Brother Benny?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Brother Siang Chai. Okay, I think this is a common question that's been asked. So if we look at for example, what we've just discussed early on in the Bhattikarata Sutta, asking us to live in the present. So we can look at this problem by asking ourselves, are we continuously performing in our jobs now? Right? If we are continuously a performer in our job, and the inevitable happens that we lose our jobs, then we have the confidence that we can easily get the next job. Or we may even come out and be an entrepreneur on our own. All right. So I think what we need to do is to create the right conditions so that whatever happens in the future, we're not too worried about it. Now, bear in mind, COVID-19 may just be the excuse for companies to actually downsize, to retrench. So always remember that it could just be an excuse, because even without the COVID-19, all companies in the world, in my previous life, I was in the banking sector. That was many years ago, and the banking sector, they have already automated. People lost their jobs. Everything has been outsourced. Now the manufacturing sector is also doing that. It's all been outsourced. All right. So jobs will be lost. All right. So, but as long as you are performing, you develop, your competent skills, then you don't really need to worry about that. Right? I've actually spoke to, or actually met some colleagues who, because of the COVID, they got retrenched. Well, they got a decent pay, and because they are good performers, very easily they could get another job. So, so in a way, they don't need to really worry too much about it. So I think the present is very important. So rather than worrying too much about what's going to happen to you, look at yourself today, right? If you're working for an organization, are you competent in what you're doing? All right. If you're competent, then you don't really need to worry, because if you're competent, you will probably be the last person that any company would want to let go. Okay. Yeah. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Brother Benny, for that very interesting answer. We now move on to another question, and this question is directed to Sister Paru. The question goes like this. Many less fortunate people are struggling to stay afloat. That is, people like the street vendors, the homeless, etc. So besides the monetary help, how can we further offer help to these people? Sister Paru?
Thank you, Acharya Siang Chai. Good morning, everyone. So thank you for the question. So the first thing I think we have to remember is this is the nature of life. Whether they're homeless people, people who are street vendors, many things that we see that is the true nature of life. And we cannot by ourselves we cannot say we are like the superhero, we want to change everything. That is the reality of the situation. So besides, as you say, providing these monetary contributions, we can see they are actually being taken care of. Like the homeless people, we can see there are a lot of people actually providing food for them. They are taken care of. And I think due to their whatever their karmic conditions, they are where they are. But I think at the end of the day, what is most important is we ourselves as a being with a mind. How can we be cultivate the balanced mind, the equanimous mind in viewing these things? Because there's no way we can help everyone in this world. There's no way we can do that. So the way that we can do is whatever we can do, we do by providing monetary help, by providing any kind of offerings in terms of comfort or words. But other than that, I think it's the way we view it. So the other thing we can do is train ourselves. When we see these kind of things, you can ask, is there anything I can do? Like Brother Benny said, is there anything I can do about it? If there is whatever I can do, I must rejoice and say, yes, I've done what I can do within my means and be equanimous. So this is what I think I can share. Being positive, we cannot. I can give an example. Last time when I was very young, I was actually from a very underprivileged background. We too, we were in the estate. We were very poor at that time. But that did not stop me from not being poor all my life. I worked. So when we look at people, we imagine that they will be there all the time. It is not so. There will be people helping them. There will be agencies helping them. Things will happen to them. So it's just that how we view it at this moment. So back to you, Acharya.
Thank you very much, Sister Paru. Yeah, so much personal insights and wisdom in what Sister Paru says. And now there is this question which is directed to Dr. Ong. And it goes like this. Despite our best efforts of trying to guide our close family, especially the elders, towards staying positive during the pandemic, some still exhibit the complaining mind and negative thoughts. What kind of mentality should we maintain besides showing patience and trying to think from their perspective? Dr. Ong, please.
Thank you, Brother Chang Chai. This question is quite well thought out. Actually, the questioner have pointed out two very important things here. One is what we can do from our side, and two, what we can do for the other person. So if you are in a family situation where one person is feeling negative all the time, then you will have to review these two aspects. One, what can you do from your side? And from your side, as well as from the side of all the members of the family, it's like our Buddhist family, we have to get together. We have to get together and we have to be of one mind to help this person. And so one way to do that is to create a safe space for everyone. Meaning the family should come together and decide, okay, this is how we are going to approach to help this person who is depressed or is having a lot of negative thoughts, or who is thinking so negatively that the thoughts are spiraling out of control. So what can you do as a family? You can sit down and talk to each other in a very honest and open way. So creating a safe space for everyone to discuss the issue is important. And by safe space here, I mean you start off by telling everybody, we are not here to judge anyone. We are not here to criticize anyone. What we want to do is to understand the situation and see what best we can do to help each other, right? So of course, what happens, the goal then is to create an environment where there is calmness, there is equanimity, so that we are all on the same page and we can work together to help that person. As to what can we do, to help the person who is having a negative mind all the time. The problem with this is that the person may have this habit, a lot of us have this negative habit of thinking and focusing on negative things. This is called rumination. This is the habit of focusing on negative thoughts over and over again until it pulls us down and we can get caught in a vicious cycle. So the thing to do is to try to break out of that cycle of thinking. And actually in this, the Buddha, the Sutta, the Buddha in Majjhima Nikaya number 20, Vittaka Santara Sutta, the Buddha actually outlined 5 methods or 5 ways we can use to transform our negative thoughts or to manage our negative thoughts. The first step actually is to replace a negative thoughts with a positive thoughts or a neutral thoughts. Right? So instead of focusing, say, on anger or something that is upsetting to you, tune in to something positive, something happy, or something even neutral. All right, that is step number 1. Step number 2 is to reflect on what are the negative consequences that we can have if we continue to think negatively like this. So that would give us more incentive to put in the extra effort to work harder to change the way we think. That's step number 2. Step number 3 is to not feed the negative thinking. So in other words, instead of, let's say if something triggers you that cause you to start thinking negatively, that avoid that triggers. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's an event. If this is a person or an event, then avoid that person or the event so that you don't keep feeding the thoughts, right? And then step number 4 is actually to slow down our thinking. This is training our mind to think slowly, calmly. The Buddha gives the analogy is of if a person is running, walk. Ask him to walk. And if the person is walking, ask him to stand, stay still. So this is what we want to do with our mind as well. And lastly, the Buddha says, if everything else fails, you have to use brute strength to stop your negative thoughts. Okay, these were the 5 methods that the Buddha mentioned in these suttas. Of course, like all mind training is easier said than done. And all this is because we already have long mental habits. And we need to do this bit by bit, slowly. Okay, start with whatever we can. And then move on to something harder to do. Now, the other way, instead of training our mind to focus on something positive or to reduce the feeding of the mind, the other way is to totally distract our mind by simple things like chanting. And this is especially useful if that person who is negative is an elderly person. Because, elderly person already have very set established habits and it's hard to train them to change their mindset. So the thing that you can offer is to teach them to focus on chanting. If you chant and you focus on that chanting, then that alone is a distraction already. And with frequent chanting, it can calm the mind down. So like what I said earlier, chanting is a very effective way. So I think, I hope that answers the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ong. I think the advice given by the 3 speakers does really tell us that we need to prepare ourselves, train our minds for some kind of future difficulty. I think when the difficulty actually happens to us, it would be very difficult yeah, for us to bring our minds to the state that we want. Yeah, because we are actually creatures of habit. We like to do things that we enjoy. So the more we train ourselves earlier, beforehand, yeah, then we will not be disturbed, or we will be able to cope, yeah, with the demands of the problem that pops up when we least expect it. You know, when the problem already pops up, then we start training ourselves. It might be too late. Thank you, Dr. Ong. This question goes to Brother Benny Liao, and it says, does letting go or the practice of non-attachment leads us not to care for others, including our loved ones? Brother Benny?
Okay, yeah, I think this has been a kind of a common question that's been asked. So I think it could be because of this word non-attachment itself. And many people confuse this word non-attachment with other terms like detachment. You know, some people even thought it could lead to indifference. So non-attachment from the Buddhist sense is actually the practice of being present and being mindful about what's happening. Whereas detachment is actually trying to distance ourselves from others, usually out of total disinterest. It can even be seen as a form of escapism, right? So when one practices non-attachment, one let go of this illusion of one's or attachment to oneself. And what happens is when this happens, what arises will be qualities like compassion, understanding the interdependent nature of our existence, that we are not alone in this samsaric world. And then the acceptance that, yes, this world, there's a lot of dukkha, there's a lot of suffering. So what are we doing to help other sentient beings? All right. So in this case, non-attachment becomes a very positive attitude in our mind. All right. And definitely there's no way that we will lose that care or that love for our loved ones. I can immediately think of two wonderful books, one written by Ajahn Sumedho called Mind and Its Way. Now, if you read that book, there's actually a chapter on what is the real meaning of non-attachment, because similar questions were asked of Ajahn Sumedho, and he explains it very beautifully in that book called The Mind and Its Way. So due to lack of time, I'll just introduce you the title of that book and you can find it. Now, the other one I can think of is U Pandita, Sayadaw U Pandita, who also explains the meaning of non-attachment as equivalent to more like equanimity. So it's not a question of indifference, right? So when one practices non-attachment, is actually non-attachment to that illusion of a self, right? That non-identification of that self. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Benny Liao. I have with me now another question for Dr. Ong. Yeah, it seems that many people want advice from Dr. Ong. It says, please advise on how to help a friend who has an aggressive cancer, suffering from this disease, with about 6 months to live. But he is still in the why me stage of mind. How to help this kind of person, Dr. Ong?
For anyone who is having a terminal cancer, and because that would be defined as a terminal cancer, because anyone who's got a cancer that has only about 6 more months of life will be considered as terminal. There are a few things we can do to support the person. Medically, what we would normally do is to refer that person to hospice care. There are quite a number of hospice care in our country, Hospice Malaysia, Kasih Hospice, and Asunta Hospice as well. So there are quite a number of hospices that we can approach for them. And the goal of this hospice will be to help alleviate their pain, alleviate their physical pain. But for mental pain, for a person who is still in a stage of denial and bargaining with God about why me, then we need some emotional support for this person. So in this case, what we can do is, as again, create a safe space where you can have honest discussion with that person. But that will mean you need to more or less know how ready this person is for honest discussion to be able to face the truth. So because if the person is not ready to face the truth, we don't try to force it onto that person. Sometimes what is needed is actually just time, because they need to go through the stages of their suffering. So giving them time until they are ready might be a useful thing. But in the meantime, what we can do is continue to support them emotionally, mentally, physically, making sure that they are well cared, nutritionally taken care of, any nursing care also is taken care of. This is what we normally do from my medical perspective. Maybe from the community perspective and all the other panelists would like to add on.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ong. I have this question for Sister Paru. How do we care for people who have recovered from COVID-19? If they happen to be staying around our area, or actually is our colleague, someone that we actually know, how do we take care of these people? Sister Paru?
Thank you for the question. Again, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of that person who was sick or had that COVID-19. Imagine if we ourselves had that sickness and we are back home, how would we like to be treated? So the same way how we would like to be treated, we can give that kind of empathy and kindness to the other person. Just as an example, where I stay, we have a community, we have a, what do you call that, an RA, resident community, and we are all linked via a WhatsApp group. So there is one person, one family member of that group who was actually was warded at Sungai Buloh Hospital and had to spend time, and the whole family was actually quarantined. But you can see from the WhatsApp chat group how supportive others are. There are a lot of many messages of, in fact, daily basis, there was a lot of positive messages for this person. And not only that, a lot of help was offered to the family, like buying provisions for them, getting them food, what is it they need. Many kind of things were done for them. So what we have to do is, in this very simple, all we have to do is think that we are the ones who have got this sickness, and how would we like to be treated, and give the same kind of treatment and positivity to that person. Back to you, Acharya.
Thank you very much, Sister Paru. Yeah, such a considerate reply. And here is a question for Brother Benny Liao again. And it goes like this. Could you explain further, and this is very interesting, could you explain further why people tend to be harsh and unkind to themselves, but it's easier for them to be kind to others? How do we overcome this condition? Brother Benny Liao, please.
Okay, that's an interesting question. Nagarjuna, in one of his texts called Letters to a Friend, he says there are 4 types of people in this world. One who brings happiness to oneself, that means one who is kind to oneself. One who is kind and brings happiness to others. One who brings happiness to oneself and others. one who brings happiness neither to oneself to others. So in this samsaric world, we have all kinds of people. Yeah. So obviously there'll be one type of people who tends to be unkind to themselves, but kind to others. Now, but if we understand the Buddha's teachings, then the ideal person is someone who brings happiness, who is kind, not just to oneself, but also to others. All right. So one's benefit, not just oneself, one benefits others as well. So that is why in my talk early on, I was saying that we have many of these good, wonderful teachings, but unless we absorb it into one's own personal philosophy of life, until we make it part of our own personal philosophy, then we will not be able to benefit much from all those wonderful, great teachings that Buddha has taught. So this is just one example, a very simple 4-line statement from Nagarjuna. So which means that if we have the opportunity, then we have to have a paradigm shift in the way we look at things. Just as it's important to cherish others, to help others, we also have to develop ourselves, okay? So I think that's very important. The Buddha also gave many teachings about the preciousness of this human life, right? That this human life that we have is very precious. So we have to take good care of ourselves. We have to develop ourselves. So the question is how do we cultivate that? So if one understand the teachings, one put it into practice, then one realize the importance that one also needs to take care of oneself. Or sometimes we use the word self-compassion. Just as we have compassion for others, we also have got compassion for ourselves, right? And I think many of you who practice metta, you also realize that you also need to radiate metta to yourself, right? If you only radiate metta to others, then you think, oh, I'm a terrible person, I'm a hopeless person, I'm a useless person. That's not going to work very well either, okay? So we need to change our mindset, all right? Taking care of ourselves doesn't mean that we become egoistic. We can adopt the bodhisattva approach that we take care of ourselves so that we are well enough, we can take care of others, all right? So we can adopt that very positive attitude. Then today in modern psychology, you have heard of positive psychology, all right? There's a lot been written by people like Martin Seligman. So picking up a copy of that book, all right? If you are very new to Buddhism, you can pick up a copy of one of those books on positive psychology. It will tell you that, it actually starts with ourselves. We have to take care of ourselves before we can even consider taking care of others. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Benny Liao. I think it's indeed true that if we are not at peace with ourselves, it's very hard for us to meaningfully serve others. So it's good that we also have metta towards ourselves, in order to be effective in our Dhamma work. We have this question that goes to Dr. Ong again, and it goes, are we being selfish if we distance ourselves from the negative people? Are we being selfish? Dr. Ong?
Thank you, Brother Siang Chai. Actually, Brother Benny has already answered that question. It's all about self-love as well. Because I think these questions cannot be answered specifically. It's got to be conditionally. It depends on your level of mental state as well. If you are in the presence of someone who is negative and you feel that it's overwhelming you, then out of self-compassion, out of self-love, you might want to actually distance yourself from that person because it's too overwhelming for you. On the other hand, if you are in a position to be able to feel that I'm okay in that person's presence, I am strong enough, I think I'm stable enough, I am confident that I can manage it, then it's fine, you can stay. And if you feel that, hey, in fact, maybe I can do something for that person, maybe I can try to help the person become more positive, then right, go ahead. So it really depends on your mental state and your mental ability. If it is too overwhelming, you always can step back, right? I think that this is a very useful principles for us in dealing with people as a whole. If it is too overwhelming, the situation is too overwhelming, we can always step backward, take a rest, a respite. So I won't consider that as being selfish. I consider that as being self-compassionate. Brother Siang Chai.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ong. And we have come to the time where we can only take one more question. And this question is directed at Sister Paru. It goes like this. What should we do if one cannot stop worrying and cope with the uncertainty of this pandemic? Which means the question, the state of the mind is still worrying and cannot stop this worrying. Sister Paru?
Thank you, Acharya, for the question. So, well, in this pandemic, number one, our worries, our anxieties are all triggered because things are very uncertain and it is a very uncontrollable situation. We cannot control it and it is a very uncertain situation. Number two, why do we have worries and anxieties is because we are very uncomfortable because we are attached to very specific kind of outcomes, because we are so used to living our life, like we go out when we want, we eat what we want, we travel wherever we want. So all these situations are very uncomfortable for us. And then we what do you call that? We do not accept these situations as it is. So now what we can do is, because this is a situation where we cannot control the situation, and because we feel very uncomfortable with it. So the third thing we can do is we observe this anxiety, actually what it feels like. So the answer actually lies within ourselves, to actually look at our anxiety and observe this anxiety. Look at the mind and see where, what is the thing that we are uncomfortable with. The fourth thing we can do is, if we have the anxieties or these worries are just like very overwhelming, we can seek the help of friends and family. Sometimes talking to somebody, a good friend, like Dr. Ong, for example, we can actually have some kind of relief, because just by talking, we can get some kind of answers or relief that will kind of give us some kind of peace. So over this pandemic, I also have received many calls from many Buddhist brothers and sisters who themselves face a lot of these kind of things. So just by talking to them, you don't have to give them a lot of answers, but just by talking, by reassuring, by being empathy to their situation, being empathetic to their situation, it can also release their our anxiety. So look for someone who can give us the kind of what do you call that, relief. And if it is really, really, really bad that we really cannot control, or we are feeling very unhappy, then there is a thing that we can do, is seeking professional help. It means going to a counselor or someone who we can open up our hearts to, as the doctor said, a safe space for us to actually look into our difficulties. So these are some of the things that if it is really that we cannot control. So I hope this can shed some light on this person who has asked this question. So back to you, Acharya.
Thank you very much, Sister Paru. Indeed, would like to thank all our three speakers for sharing with us their knowledge, and their wisdom. We've come to the end of the forum proper. And so this is an opportunity for me to thank, firstly, the three speakers and everyone involved in the production of this forum. We've had, needless to say, certain problems, and difficulties in assembling all the components. So right now we have people taking care of the broadcast of this forum at the different centers. Yeah, and for that, I would like to thank everyone involved, the technical team, the support, the brothers and sisters, everyone who have assisted us, yeah, in any way. Thank you so very, very much from Nalanda Institute. What we have learned from hearing the speakers share their presentations, as well as answering the questions, is that life is uncertain. Yeah, we really do not know what will befall us. And this is a key advice of the Buddha. And so, as Buddhists, yeah, the followers of the Buddha and practitioners of the Dhamma, we should develop, our abilities to cope with that will come to us anytime. Yeah, and we are not prepared for many things. For example, who would know that at the beginning of this year we would be facing a pandemic that affects every single person in every corner of the earth? Yeah, it certainly was not expected, but we have to cope. Yeah, we have to draw on our strengths, we have to draw on our knowledge, we have to use what we have learned, yeah, in order to be resilient, in order to be positive and not be drawn down, yeah, to depression, to anxiety, to unhappiness, the best way we can. And in the Buddha's teachings, we have a wealth. It is a treasure trove, yeah, of good advice, because the Buddha himself also encountered a lot of difficulties. It's not that when he became enlightened, every difficulty vanished, yeah, from his life. No, he had to cope with a lot of uh, anxiety, a lot of difficulties that other teachers, and other practitioners heard, yeah, through at his direction. But he was the perfect teacher. He remained equanimous throughout all the difficulties that he encountered. And as such, he is the best inspiration for us at this time. So again, let me express my thanks, my gratitude to everyone involved, yeah, at different locations, and also to you too, yeah, Dhamma brothers and sisters, for joining us in this forum. I hope you have learned much, from what the speakers have shared, and you will take this into your lives, yeah, as your own personal spiritual practice.